This video is sponsored by Ground News. Let me ask you a question. What do you think of when I say the world's best weapon? Probably most of you jump to nuclear weapons because of just how devastating a single blast is. Or you may think of an influential infantry rifle like the AR-15 or AK-47, which is so iconic it has its own pride flag. But to me, the modern aircraft carrier, including everything within its hull, may be the most effective weapon systems to ever be floated. They can control areas the size of California as they patrol and can hit targets hundreds of miles inland by throwing and catching aircraft in all weather, day or night, meaning they can project air power wherever it's needed without the need for land-based runways or air bases. Some of these floating cities don't even need to be refueled for decades, only coming into port to refill on supplies like food, ammo, and crew changes. It's a concept so crazy it feels like it shouldn't even be possible, and yet carriers are proudly displayed as the flagships of many countries' naval fleets. So, what is an aircraft carrier? I mean, if we're going by the most literal definition, it's something that carries aircraft. So that means this is an aircraft carrier. And this. Don't forget this guy. And yeah, if you want to be an asshole about it, even this thing. Clearly, we're not going to talk about all those today. In terms of a less disingenuous definition, it's a military naval vessel that retains and launches aircraft. The first example actually shows up in the early 1800s, where kite carriers would be employed. Not much is known about these ships, but some form of apparatus was built aboard British ships where kites were launched and used to drop propaganda leaflets on their immortal enemies, the French. A few decades later, balloon launching ships were experimented with, being used notably in bombing operations by the Austro-Hungarians in the 1840s, and then both by the Union and the losers in the American Civil War as recon and spotting balloons, however in a very limited capacity. By the early 1900s, balloon carriers actually became a bit more normal, having around a dozen or so commissioned by World War I. But by the time the Great War wrapped up, seaplane carriers had made the balloon boys obsolete. Now, these boats would carry aircraft capable of taking off and landing in the water rather than carrying a whole ass runway around. They would drop the seaplanes in the water via a crane or sometimes launch them with a catapult. They would go do the mission and then land near the boat and get picked back up again. Some iterations would even sport a long flat deck for light seaplanes that could take off in just a few dozen feet. But for landing, they would still have to be recovered from the water. In the interwar period, aka German Cope time, we finally see aircraft carriers that look more familiar, with full flat decks for aircraft to take off and land from, complete with an offset tower to control both the aircraft and serve as the bridge of the ship. During World War II, these were fielded by tons of different countries on both sides of the conflict and proved just how effective the aircraft carrier concept is. In these early years, we also see the innovation and implementation of things like arresting gear, internal hangars, and aircraft elevators, all things that are iconic part of modern carriers. By the Cold War, most superpowers had well-established doctrine when it came to using aircraft carriers. As they grew in size, most users of the platform would dub them supercarriers, although this is mostly just a PR term to hype themselves up, as there is no defined class for what exactly makes it a supercarrier, kind of like how 4.5 and 5th gen aircraft kind of blur that line. Most notable operators of carriers from the Cold War to modern times include the US, the UK, and China, although a good handful of other nations operate smaller carriers like Italy, India, France, Canada, Japan, and even Spain. Russia, along with a few other countries, have had them in the past, but don't technically have any in active service at the moment, although they do have a few under construction. The US is way out in front in terms of numbers, because if it's worth doing, it's worth overdoing. America, fuck yeah! Coming again to save the motherfucking day! With 11 in active service. Everyone else seems to like them in pairs, except Spain and France, who only have a single carrier each. Now, while each country does have its own little ins and outs of how the modern carriers operate, for the most part, the layout of a carrier is pretty much the same across the board. To start, there's a control tower off to the side, generally on the starboard or right side of the ship, as incoming and outgoing aircraft will fly a left-handed pattern. Japan is the outlier here, with some of their carriers having port side towers in World War II. Aircraft are launched from the front of the ship. The movement of the ship adds to its airspeed, and the ship can turn into any headwind, which gives the aircraft the best possible chance to take off. They also typically have some sort of assisted takeoff mechanism. The most common version of this system takes the form of a catapult that the aircraft's nose gear can lock into. These have historically been powered by the glorious force of steam. However, the newest Chinese carriers are installing railgun-style catapults powered by electromagnets. The other most common form of assisted takeoff is just a fucking ramp. This is the simplest method. However, it can cause more wear and tear on the aircraft that use them when compared to catapult launchers. When it comes to the landing strip, they are typically at a slight angle. This adds both more area for the planes to land and offers them a way to take off again if the landing needs to be aborted. This also allows for the simultaneous use of the catapults without the risk of the landing plane hitting another that is about to take off. Arresting equipment appears in the form of cables, typically 4, run across the landing strip. Aircraft are equipped with hooks that catch the cables and slow the aircraft down in a much shorter distance than would otherwise be possible. There also exists a net that can be drawn across the landing strip to catch any aircraft that crash due to a malfunction in something like the hook, landing gear, or engines. The ships typically have a large hangar down below deck to house and maintain the aircraft. While the most advanced carriers are powered by a nuclear reactor, some are still conventionally powered by diesel electric engines and gas turbines. Most full-size carriers can have a crew anywhere between 5,000 and 7,000 personnel. Carriers also have a full 360-degree coverage of point defenses, including the Sea-Whiz 20mm and several missile launchers for things like the SM-2 and the Sea Sparrow, alongside full electronic countermeasures and even chaff launchers. Other than the traditional supercarriers, there also exist some other types. The most notable and probably well-known alternative are the amphibious assault ships, also sometimes called assault carriers, helicopter carriers, or landing helicopter docks. These boys are considerably smaller than supercarriers. The USS Gerald R. Ford, one of the US's most advanced carriers, comes in at just over 1,100 feet, or about 335 meters for you filthy commies over in Europe, whereas the USS Wasp, LHD, is just about 840 feet, or 256 meters. These guys are more akin to the older World War II carriers in that they are just a flat deck and lack any launch or arresting gear, but that's because such things aren't needed. They exclusively launch helicopters and VTOL or STOVL aircraft, meaning aircraft that can take off in either a very short distance or lift straight up and land straight up and down, just like a helicopter. They also carry a host of landing craft for taking beaches, as these carriers are used extensively by the USMC. There also exists some frigates that have a single helipad at the aft of the ship and usually carry 1 to 2 rotor aircraft. One idea for an aircraft carrier that never really took off was the flying carrier. Now, I know what you're thinking. But sadly, that's not what we're going into here. The idea was a large airframe that would be modified to house several parasite fighters, which would launch from this larger plane, go do plane things, and then redock to the mothership. This idea was so fucking cool that several countries tried it over decades of attempts, using everything from a C-130 to a 747. The most notable of these attempts came from a project that was going to convert a B-36 and even sparked a prototype fighter, the F-85 Goblin. 2 of these fighters were built and jerry-rigged to fly from a B-29, but that's as far as it went. The last interesting variant I want to talk about is the submarine carrier. Again, this isn't as cool as it sounds on paper. These guys were actually operational in World War I and II, but they were just seaplane carriers like we talked about earlier. Some acted as refueling points, others would actually disassemble small seaplanes and rebuild them when surfaced, but there's no Captain Torres action here. One last thing we should talk about is the aircraft used on these ships. Aircraft carriers can't just use any old plane on it, at least in a practical sense. A fact some of you may not know is that a lot of aircraft used in the Air Force, including the F-16 and F-22, have arresting hooks, just like the ones used on naval aircraft. However, these are to be used only for emergency landings on airfields that have the Back 14 arresting system installed. They're not supposed to be used on carriers.
Can you do it? Yeah. Should you do it? No.
Aircraft that land on runways, the F-16 in particular, have to touch down very softly to avoid damage to the plane. Carrier-borne aircraft usually come in for a landing at a much steeper slope and slam into the deck of the ship to ensure the hook actually grabs one of the cables. So, in addition to the hook, these guys have beefed up landing gear. This is very well demonstrated when you compare the landing gear of the F-35A, used in the Air Force, to the F-35C, used in the Navy. Carrier aircraft also come with a launch bar that hooks into the catapult. Without that, the F-22 and F-16 couldn't safely and reliably take off from the ship. Although some aircraft can do this, such as the Chinese J-15 and Russian Su-33, both of which are designed to take off unassisted. Notable U.S. carrier-borne aircraft from throughout the years include the F-4, the E-2, the F-14, the F-18, and the F-35C. Aboard assault carriers, we see the AV-8 Harrier, the V-22 Osprey, the F-35B, alongside a multitude of helicopters including the CH-53, the SH-60, and the AH-1Z Viper. That's by no means a comprehensive list of carrier-borne aircraft, but there's honestly too many to go through, and those are the ones that make the posters. Now, aircraft carriers appear all over the media. As per usual, I'm going to cover more modern games in detail here, but there's a ton throughout the history of video games. Too many for me to cover in depth, and honestly, too many for me to even name. But I'm going to showcase some older, more well-known games, and then we'll dive into the big ones. But before that, let's talk about today's sponsor, Ground News. I know it may not seem like it, but I give my best effort to try and be a functioning adult. And part of that is being well informed. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard, but
There's a horse loose in a hospital.
things move very quickly in today's day and age. And if you want to keep up to date on everything that's going on in the world, take a look at Ground News. It's a news aggregate site founded by a former NASA scientist that collects headlines from across the political spectrum to give you the most complete picture possible without falling prey to the individual biases of any one news outlet. Get off Facebook, get off Twitter, get off Reddit, get off YouTube. Well, okay, watch this video first and maybe another one. And then head down to the description, click on my affiliate link, and you can get 40% off a subscription to Ground News. Or honestly, don't. While the paid subscriptions do give you more tools like the blind spot feature or media bias ratings, you can go look at Ground News for free. I don't get paid unless you sign up through my link, and I'm still telling you, you can go do it for free. That's how much I believe in Ground News. I've used Ground News since before they started to sponsor me, and the paid subscriptions are definitely worth it. So if you want to help support the channel, check out my discount in the description. Break free of the echo chambers and just read some fucking news. Thanks again to Ground News for sponsoring this video. And now, let's take a look at some aircraft carriers in gaming.
What are we waiting for?
We're not walking in there until you promise to play nice.
Are you serious?
Repeat after me. Don't fuck with the mayor.
Look, sweetie, I'll fuck with whoever I want to fuck with. I mean, who does this guy think he is?
Viola, is this the kid you were talking about?
Burt fucking Reynolds?
If you've never heard of Saints Row, it's just GTA if they stopped caring. The series has kind of gone downhill in recent years, but the third installment, Saints Row the Third, is the series' peak, in my opinion at least. We don't have to get too into the story beats, but you're a crime boss in charge of the international media conglomerate street gang, the Saints. Think of it if Disney also robbed banks and ran a sex trafficking ring. You're VOT, basically. You come to the city of, I think it's like Steel Mill or Steel something, I don't know, who cares, and build your empire's foothold. Eventually, this sci-fi paramilitary force occupies the city because of all the wacky antics you've been up to. And wouldn't you know it, they have an aircraft carrier. This thing is mostly a set piece in the earlier stages of the game, but in one of the final missions, it takes off and hovers over the city.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now? They fly now!
There's this really fun mission where you fly up to it, kill a bunch of the Space Marines on board, kill the Primarch, and fly away in one of their cool VTOL jets. Does this carrier have any kind of real-world analog to compare it to? Nah. But it's just kind of fucking cool, and I miss Saints Row 3 and wanted to share it with you guys. If you've never played any Saints Row, you can find them for pretty cheap online. They get more and more wacky as time goes on. I think the fifth one takes place in Hell. I know the fourth one takes place in the Matrix. They're a good time if you want to go back and play something new to you. All right, here we have some real carriers. When I was first thinking if Ace Combat deserves to be in the main rundown or just an honorable mention, I wasn't really sure what I would even talk about for Ace Combat 7. Like, yeah, there is a docked carrier in the first mission, sure, and you land on like an old derelict one towards the end of the game. Certain aircraft will have you start on one, the F-14 in particular, but then what? And then I remembered, the Arsenal Bird. While not a conventional carrier, it is the most probable depiction of what a practical flying carrier might look like, specifically when you hear about how 6th-gen aircraft will control swarms of UAVs. That's pretty much what this thing does, and even uses UAVs based on a real design, the X-47 UCAV. Yeah, I know, ignore the force fields. Other than that, this thing is not outside the realm of possibility for a flying carrier. One of the biggest hurdles when it came to designing a flying carrier in real life was both capacity and redocking. But both of those issues seem to be solved with this design. It can carry, looks like, hundreds of fighters, and they can autonomously dock back to it. But is that enough to talk about for Ace Combat? And then it hit me again. The Alicorn. The Alicorn was a submarine carrier, and not like the boring real ones. This thing would surface and have a full runway and hangar for full-sized fighters to launch from. Now, unlike the Arsenal Bird, this shit would never work, at least not in any kind of practical sense. But it's anime and fuck, and if it did work, I could see why it'd be such a huge threat. Sadly, I don't think there's a way you could design a runway that could stand up to being submerged in ocean water all the time and be able to launch aircraft just seconds after launching. And it kind of looks like a dick. Guess what? War Thunder, while it does have naval ships, doesn't have playable carriers. And yeah, they appear on some maps, but womp womp, that's why it was in the montage. WoW, no, not that WoW, the other WoW, does have playable carriers. And they kind of suck. You pretty much park them somewhere safe and then send out squadrons of planes to attack other ships. Issue is, at least from what I played, other ships have very good point defenses and can just shoot down incoming planes very effectively. While it's cool that carriers are included, I just don't think it isn't that fun in terms of a gameplay loop. It is safe. I never sank in any game I was a carrier in, but the cannon gameplay was just flat out more enjoyable, so maybe the snail was onto something when they didn't include carriers, or maybe Wargaming just didn't figure out the right gameplay. Either way, it's not really something I'd recommend doing, at least in the current state. World of Warships does have premium ships, just like War Thunder, and that's how I got my hands on this, because didn't feel like grinding all the way out. But the United States class does look like a sick aircraft carrier. Oh yeah, and I guess this WoW also does have carriers.
I wonder what this does. Hassan! Oh! Jesus Christ! Oh shit! Oh! What the fuck? Hassan! Put it back up!
Bank angle.
Oh! Oh! Okay. Hey, can you come to Sim? Come
Wind shear. Wind shear.
I believe it was when Top Gun Maverick came out that MS Flight Sim added some kind of carrier functionality to a specific Top Gun Maverick scenario. And soon after, a module by Miltech Simulations added the carrier functionality to outside that scenario. So we have carriers here. Some of these are static and some are moving, and they're scattered all around the world, a few dozen in total, including Ford class and Nimitz class, among a few others. Looking around, there's some crew on the deck, and they do have full interior hangars, which is something we don't see a whole lot of on this list. So it's a nice touch. It also adds a FOLS, or functional optical landing system, which is a cross of lights that lets the pilot know how their landing is. Something that is kind of hand wavy is that pretty much any aircraft, whether carrier capable or not, can use the arresters catapult. So you can, do shit like this. It's an interesting bit of kit, and it's only $12. I don't think it has a super practical place in MS Flight Sim. According to Miltech's website, it is fully compatible with the 2024 version. So if you are suffering through that mess and want to give this module a go, you shouldn't have any issues, at least with the carriers.
And if it's true, I will try and keep it wrong. That's all. Sometimes I don't even know this lonely, lonely. I hate the shop is doing my shit. She was looking kind of dumb with her finger in her thumb in the shape of an L on her forehead.
Hell yeah, Nuke Op update. Recently, we fucking ate. This update included a new plane, which is a cross between the F-35 and X-32, goofy ass smile included, so we'll have to include that in the update video coming in the near future. We also got a new map, which is pretty heavily naval focused, as well as some new vehicles, including an assault carrier. But even before all that was added, we had the traditional super carrier. Now, the full-size boat here is the one and only ramp launcher we're going to see today, and I'm kind of surprised by that fact. Ramps in real life are obviously much more mechanically simple than a catapult, and the same is true for games. So as long as the collider on the ramp is high fidelity enough, then using it and the physics engine to launch the aircraft sounds like a much easier way to get them up in the air rather than coding a whole ass catapult. The carrier is kind of futuristic, invoking the same look and feel as that fucking weird stealth ship that Lockheed made, but given the game's near future setting, I'll let that slide. On the assault carrier, it actually sports two separate towers, both of which have that same angular look. They're used to launch the new FS-20 Vortex. Both carriers have interiors with working elevators, but they're only used for aircraft selection and spawning. In the newer map, carriers are a huge part of controlling sections of the AO, since it's mostly ocean. Now, while not as influential on the older map, they still have a pretty big role to play. Nuclear option is kind of mind-blowing in terms of how much new content they put out. Since I've been making videos, they've added 2 new fully playable aircraft, a new map, and even like new UI elements. If you're into aviation games, you owe it yourself to drop the $18 and get this gem.
For a while, but I made a mistake.
that you always have to be there for your thing.
We're so happy to stay. Just a reminder, ask that you not use the DVD player, but you can watch any of the VHSs. We actually have present danger, here's most of a puzzle.
VTOL VR, my beloved. Carrier-based operations are a mainstay in VTOL and have been since day one. Every aircraft can operate from the decks of these ships. All the fixed wing are equipped with hooks and launch bars. The catapults are very visceral when you're launched from them. It feels the best of any game we've spoken of so far, and that may be due to the VR aspect. In addition to the full-size carrier, assault carriers were added with the F-45 update, and at some point they added frigates with landing pads on the back. Now that might have been with the AH-94 update, or that could have been there the whole time to be used with the AV-42. I'm not 100% sure. The carriers feature point defenses that can actually be a huge help if you're being overrun, and the carrier can even sink with you on them. They can be set as static or scripted to patrol in the mission editor. There's also a catamaran-style double carrier used by the OpFar faction, which in all honesty, I'm kind of jealous of. It's really cool. Sadly, there's no deck crew, at least right now, which would totally be a thing. And with mods, you can even pilot this thing. Literally.
Wait a minute.
What the fuck is going on? 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 What the fuck is going on?
Surprise, surprise. Here we are back at DCS. Yeah, this is probably the most realistic implementation of a carrier. Deck crew actually giving commands for the catapult, Jester rating your landings in the F-14 and the F-4, the highest fidelity aircraft to fly onto it. It shrimply does not get better than this. It's still in development, and planned additions include things like a briefing room, playable landing signal officer, the barricade net for crash landings, among other features. Now, whereas the one in MS Flight Sim costs you $12, and all of Nuclear Option costs $18, this guy will set you back a cool $50. You do get both the Nimitz and Roosevelt class ships, 10 in total, and fully functional air defenses. I'm pretty sure you already knew the DCS Super Carrier was the best aircraft carrier in gaming, but something about the journey, friends were made along the way, something Frodo, something. We did it, chat. Talked about a boat. Would you guys like to see more naval stuff covered in the future? I have some ideas, but I'm curious about what you think, so make sure you leave a comment. Naval stuff is by no means whatsoever my area of expertise. Well, actually, nothing is my area of expertise. I'm just an idiot with a microphone and a pirated version of Sony Vegas. Anyway, if I got something wrong or left out any important details, please don't be afraid to let me know in the comments. And hey, while you're down there, I got a whole other list of shit for you to check out. First, obviously, check out Ground News. I cannot stress just how useful of a tool it is. Second, if you want to go above and beyond and support the channel, I have a Patreon link down there too. And if you want to join in on my community, my Discord server is linked, as is my Army unit, Trident Security. If you've enjoyed this video, you can subscribe and hey, watch another one after this. That's always helpful. Other than that, that's all I got. I'll see you all in the next one. Take care.